Good afternoon and welcome to the April 22 WEJF Impact Meeting sponsored by Michael Best Law Firm. My name is Allie Lynch. I am the Executive Director of WEJF. And the purpose of these semi-annual WEJF Impact Meetings is to allow donors, representatives of donor organizations, staff of our legal providers, to learn what's new at WEJF. Here are some client success stories told by representatives of the 3 legal aid service providers that WEJF supports, recognize our major sponsors, get an update on our annual campaign progress, and to just hear more, particularly to focus on those client success stories to allow donors and service providers the opportunity to hear the impact that their support of civil legal aid is having on economically disadvantaged people and people with disabilities in need of legal help. So let's jump right into it. What's new at WEJF? We're celebrating our 25th year of existence this year. The Equal Justice Coalition, which eventually became the Wisconsin Equal Justice Fund, was started in 1997. So we're in our 25th year, which is very exciting. We have a new board president each year, and for 2022, that board president is Anza D'Antonio, who is the legal director at Fisker Brands, Inc. She has been on the WEJF board since 2017, and she started her legal career actually at one of our beneficiaries as a staff attorney at Wisconsin Judicare. So that's really a neat little fun fact about Anza. She's then gone on to work as an in-house counsel and is presently at Fisker, as I said. Our president-elect is Marta Myers from Boardman and Clark Law Firm, and our secretary/president-elect is Lisa Preston from Johnson Controls. So Lisa's currently serving as our secretary, and she'll be the president of WEJF in 2024. We have a couple other new board of directors since our last impact call that you might have been on in October. Angela Schultz is our staff member representative from Marquette University. Jesus Gonzalez is a representative on the board from Rockwell Automation. And we just added 2 brand new students, both serving during their 3L years that are upcoming this year. Annie Gonring is a student at Marquette University Law School, and Kaylee Cohen is a student at UW Law School. The last new exciting thing we have going on at WEJF right now is we have a new website coming soon. Actually, it'll probably be launched on May 1st. Watch for social media posts on that for more information. And it's going to be a cleaner, more modern design. The mobile version will be more user-friendly than you might be used to on the existing site. And we will have a new email or new web address rather, www.wejf.org, rather than the old address that we currently have, which is e-justice.org. That old address will go ahead and forward to the wejf.org address so that you won't miss our website, whichever address you use for the next year or so, but we will eventually move over to that wejf.org site completely. I do want you all to save the date for the Howard B. Eisenberg Lifetime Achievement Award Dinner this year on Saturday, October 29th at the St. Kate in Milwaukee. We've been on hiatus for 2 years, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, but we're really excited and looking forward to the event this year. Registration for that event will open around September 1st. If you're on our e-newsletter list, you'll receive notification when that registration opens, and we'll post on our social media platforms as well. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if you're not already receiving our e-newsletters, you can sign up for those on the WEJF website. So I want to talk a little bit about our current realities that our beneficiary organizations, the civil legal aid providers, are facing right now. One of the most concerning things is that more potential clients had to be turned away in 2021 than the number of clients who were actually served by our providers. And this was largely due to a lack of resources. Wisconsin severely lags behind our neighboring states in terms of state funding for civil legal aid, and I'll show you a graph on the next slide in a moment. But the lack of resources is really the main, it's one of the main reasons why clients need to be turned away by our providers. So we want to raise more money going forward. Another challenge that our providers are facing right now is employee recruitment and retention. You can actually help them if you're on social media yourself. You can follow Disability Rights Wisconsin, Legal Action of Wisconsin, and Wisconsin Judicare on their social media platforms as well. They're all on Facebook. Some of them are on Twitter, some of them are on Instagram, some of them on LinkedIn as well. But if you follow them on the social media tools that you use, and you can share their job posts as they post them, that can really increase the reach of those posts and get them some more candidates than they might have otherwise had. So they'd really appreciate that help. Here's that chart of the state funding, the state funding that Wisconsin receives as compared to our neighboring states. It might be a little small, especially if you're viewing this on a smartphone, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit for you. Minnesota has some amazing programs that improve access to justice for everyone. And to say we're jealous of them over here in Wisconsin would be an understatement. They're sitting at over $14 million in state and federal funding for the year, while Wisconsin sits, I'm going to say generously, around $700,000. There's work to be done to convince both the state legislature and the governor's office to include more funding for civil legal aid in the next state budget. But feel free to reach out to me if you have any specific expertise or suggestions on our lobbying approaches. The contrast is stark even with Indiana, Iowa, and Illinois, but boy, Minnesota, we're really jealous of. Despite the challenges that our legal aid providers are facing, more than 10,000 clients are served by them collectively each year, and we have some great success stories to share with you. So I'm really happy to welcome Mike, Patrick, and Dante from our beneficiary organizations to each share a story about how they have helped their civil legal aid clients. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Like Ali said, my name is Mike Stukup. I'm a staff attorney with Disability Rights Wisconsin. Part of what DRW does is protect and advocate for the legal rights of people with disabilities in a variety of areas, including housing, employment, education, benefits. With the help of state funding like WEJF, it helped create my position to reach people who are involved in the criminal justice system. And there's a need for that. There's a high rates of people with disabilities in correctional settings compared to the general public. And there's not many organizations that help in this area. And it can be very hard to find a private attorney, someone who's in prison who's trying to vindicate violations of their rights. It can be hard to find help. So one example where my advocacy played a role in making a concrete improvement to someone in terms of advocating for their rights was a person who contacted us because he needed accommodations for his hearing loss. Before coming to prison, he had suffered multiple head injuries on multiple occasions, and one result of that was severe loss of hearing later in life. He had hearing aids, but due to the severity of his loss and the noisy prison environment, he needed additional support to successfully participate in treatment, access programming, and hear things from prison staff to make sure that he avoided punishment. This was all made more difficult with COVID because of mask requirements. He wasn't able to read lips, which is one way that he can, he needed help with beyond just using hearing aids. But staff weren't able to recognize his or accommodate his request. They were not writing things down for him, and he was told that hearing aids were enough when they really weren't. The situation got worse when another inmate had assaulted him and his hearing aids were damaged. So I'm trying to help him with several areas and trying to access the prison, including the fact that he was without hearing aids. And the prison was going to replace those hearing aids, but not with ones that had worked for him for a long period of time, that had the features that he needed to access the noisy prison environment. So part of what I did was advocating with prison staff, informing them of their obligations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, including Department of Justice guidance about ensuring, the prison's obligations to make sure people have access to effective communication. And part of that guidance was giving the person's choice primary consideration when determining what accommodation to provide. So using that guidance, I was able to advocate for the prison staff to reverse course and provide him with the hearing aids that he needed that had worked for him for a long period of time so that he could have effective communication in these various aspects of his prison life. I'm also was able to reverse a policy where the staff were refusing to write things down for him because of he couldn't read lips. So that also changed. But I'm continuing to work with the prison staff to make other changes so that he can access his environment. But I think because of my involvement, there was a change in the attitude. The prison staff seemed to understand better about what they needed to do and how to help him. And thanks to funding to our organization from WEJF, I think that it was because of that, my advocacy was able to improve the situation for him. Thanks.
Great. Patrick?
Hello, my name is Patrick Shirley, and I'm a staff attorney on the Crime Victims' Rights Project at Legal Action of Wisconsin. Our project works with victims of crime specifically in domestic violence or sexual assault cases, and we have a focus on protecting our clients' privacy rights within their cases. As some of you may know, and as I'm guessing many of you may be, tangentially aware, but maybe not deeply familiar, there are a number of mechanisms in criminal cases where defendants can try to get access to a victim's medical or psychiatric records. For a lot of our clients, this represents an extremely traumatic invasion into their lives after an already extremely traumatic event. One case that kind of exemplifies this sort of pattern is with a client who I'll call BJP for the purposes of this. BJP was sexually and physically assaulted by a person that she lived with and was in a relationship with. As with many sexual assaults, this wasn't a stranger. This is someone she had a relationship of trust with, and someone who knew details about her life, her medical history, and her psychiatric history. Because of this, when he was ultimately charged, his defense attorney brought a motion requesting that my then client, BJP, turn over to the court her psychiatric and medical records. Now, I want to be clear. In some of these cases, there may be some valid grounds for this. In this case, this motion was construed fairly generously a fishing expedition. There was no indication that BJP had been suffering from anything that would have made her unable to recall what happened, unable to perceive what was going on, or more prone to lying. Very simply put, this motion carried on the stereotype that, in particular, women who were victims of sexual assault were crazy. We became involved at that point and were able to ultimately intervene, file our own responses to the defense's motion, and see that motion denied, preventing the defense from having access to those records and further invading our client's life and making that criminal justice process a little bit less traumatic for her. I want to make one quick note here. For a lot of our clients, just being able to be heard in court has been a major victory. Prior to our project, the status of crime victims to even have a voice in this procedure and to be able to assert that their records were confidential and that the defense's motion was a fishing expedition was nebulous. And it's been the work of our project and our sister project at Judicare that's really been able to push this idea that victims should have a voice when their confidential, privileged, and insanely intimate details are threatened like this. And I'm deeply grateful for the funding that we get that allows us to do this work and to hopefully push the development of law in this area in a direction that's good for the criminal justice system generally, and specifically protective of a lot of our clients who are in an extremely vulnerable position as victims of crime, and frankly, usually as people of quite limited means. So I'm very grateful for the funding and support that you all provide, and I hope that we can continue to do this work and make a good show of it.
Thanks, Patrick. Dante?
All right, my name's Dante Haratunian. I'm a victims' rights attorney at Wisconsin Judicare. I also do family law. We do basically the same thing Legal Action Wisconsin does. The difference between us is they cover southern Wisconsin, we cover northern Wisconsin, specifically 33 of the northernmost counties. That includes Wausau, that includes Eau Claire, that includes Superior, would be the largest cities in our coverage area. We also cover Wisconsin's Native American tribes, regardless of geography. Now, there are several ways we receive clients. One of the more common ways is through referrals, through partnerships we have with local community agencies within our coverage area. That includes Indian Head, that includes Rainbow House, that includes Embrace. One such client we received was Alex. And I should pause here to add that I'm going to use some names for storytelling purposes, but none of these are actual client names. So Alex had previously been in a relationship with Brooke, and they had one child together, Cameron. Both Alex and Brooke, unfortunately, had extensive histories of drug and alcohol use. However, both had recently gone through programs to become sober. All this is pretty typical, not just in our family cases, but in our victims' rights cases. A lot of the time, alcohol specifically is unfortunately involved. Alex's parents actually raised Cameron for the first several years of Cameron's life, while Alex and Brooke were unable to due to their addictions. And now, as often is the case, basically there had been litigation before we came in. We often come in midway through cases because litigation starts, and then the people who are on the receiving end of it go to our partners and then are referred to us. So there had already been some litigation here, and on paper, according to the court, both parents were supposed to have 50-50 custody and placement, and both parents were supposed to have a week on, week off with the child. They'd swap on Saturdays. Unfortunately, after the court had issued its ruling, Brooke sort of cajoled Alex into agreeing to only have Cameron on the weekends so that Brooke could basically move in with Brooke's new partner in a different county, enroll Cameron in a school in that county. And the house they were moving into, it was, I mean, frankly, it was awful. There was active drug use in the house, even though it wasn't by Brooke. And the conditions there weren't suitable for living in the winter, essentially. At this point, Brooke then decided to file a new motion with the court asking that Brooke be given full custody, Brooke be given child support, and that Alex have all custody and placement time removed. This is when Alex, of course, came to us. We had a discussion with Alex, talked through the issues in the case. We were able to file a motion requesting the court put back in place the old order, and based on the testimony of Cameron's grandparents, we were able to get the court not only to throw out Brooke's motion, but to restore the previous order. Now, normally the story would end there. You know, we asked for something from the court and we won. Unfortunately, it doesn't. In cases like this, it's often the case that the court will not put the order into writing itself. It'll task one of the attorneys in the case with writing the order. In this case, the guardian ad litem, who's an attorney who's supposed to represent the interest of the children, was tasked with writing the order. And the guardian ad litem decided, sort of on her own initiative, that she thought the judge's order didn't comply with the law, and that she would write an order that she thought was better than what the judge had done. Not surprisingly, we objected to that, and I had to go back and forth with the GAL, but eventually what ended up happening was we just wrote a letter to the court and said, hey, this is what the GAL thinks you said. This is what, you know, I was a little more diplomatic than this. This is what you actually said. Please adopt my order. And the judge ended up adopting our order, which ultimately allowed for our client to return to 50-50 visitation with the child.
Great. Mike, Patrick, and Dante, thank you so much for sharing these inspiring stories with us and for all of your ongoing work and all of the work of your colleagues at the three organizations. We really appreciate all of your work. Before I share our final 2021 annual campaign fundraising results, I want to take a moment to recognize our major corporate law firm and foundation donors in 2021. WEJF is appreciative of their support, and nearly every organization on your screen has been a long-term supporter of WEJF, a few of them since the very beginning in 1997. So that's really incredibly generous, and we're so grateful for their support. I also want to give a big shout out to our wonderful board of directors. These folks meet several times a year to help run WEJF, work their networks for donations and sponsorships, and help spread awareness of WEJF and the work of our beneficiary organizations. So thank you to all of them. As a reminder, here's the total donations by fiscal year that WEJF has raised in the past 10 years. Again, if you're looking on a smartphone, it might be a little bit difficult to see. The values on the left of the chart might be a little tricky. So we've moved it up from just over $250,000 raised in 2011 to just over just over $365,000 in 2020. And for 2021, I feel like we should have a drum roll here because it's really, really exciting. The amount raised for our 2021 annual campaign final results from April 1st last year through March 31st of this year, it's $442,360. And I know you're all on mute, but I'm sure you're all cheering and smiling. And I know that this is just a really great number in my mind. And the board of directors is really excited to see this number. And we're just so very grateful for the work of our beneficiary organizations, those civil legal aid providers, and for all of our donors. We're just so very grateful. Thank you so much to all of you. So at this time, if you want to unmute or if you want to chat a question, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you have questions for any of our three presenters, you're welcome to ask those. If you don't have anything at this time, you're always welcome to contact me. My email address and phone number are there on the screen. They're also always on the WEJF website as well. I'm not seeing anybody unmuting, and I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'll take that as there's no questions currently. So I thank you again for your time today. I want to give a thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Michael Best Law Firm. I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.